Hi, my name is Sarah Jones. I am the creator and owner of Little Patches. You can find my shop on Etsy.com. And today I'm going to be walking you through how to attach the corners of the hockey rink to the hockey rink quilt top, as demonstrated right here. First, you'll have your two templates. Template A should look something like this, and template B should look like this. They're very similar to the Drunkard's Path type of pieces. I'm going to walk you through how to cut pieces out and attach them to the quilt top. We're going to start with template B. I'm going to turn you so you can see. I'm going to start by lining up the template with your squares of fabric. Make sure to mark with either a water-soluble pencil or a fabric marking pen. Mark the middle, and that's going to line up with the corner back here. And you can either trace this line here, or you can just go ahead and cut it out, depending on what your preference is. I'm going to trace it just because it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. And it's very light, but it's just enough for me to see by. And I'm doing all 4 of my corners at the same time, so I'll be cutting through all 4 layers. And there you have the corner pieces that will be attaching to the quilt top corners. Now we need to mark the middle of each of these pieces, and you can either do that by lining up your template against each one and marking the middle, or you can fold them in half and iron them so that there's a crease on each one. That's what I like to do preferably, but you just go ahead and you fold it in half. And then iron it flat. You can either do this with your finger or go ahead and do it with the actual iron. An iron will give you a more defined crease. But for example, we're going to go ahead and just do one corner. So we have template B ready to go. Then you're going to take template A. I'm going to go over here to the ironing board, and I'll show you how to do that. I fold my quilt top up in fourths so that the middle of the quilt top is here and all of my corners are here. You want to lay it flat, either on your ironing board or on your sewing table, however you would like to do this. Make sure you have your pencil with you. And then go ahead and take a template and line it up with the corners of your quilt top. It should look something like this. Then what you should do is mark where the template stops. I'm actually going to pull you over a little bit more so you can see. So I have my template lined up here. I'm going to mark the ends right here and over here. I will need to do this for each corner, otherwise you won't be able to see it through all 4 layers. You can go ahead and mark the middle, but again I do the ironing section with this, and I do all 4 at the same time again here. And to iron, or to get the middle crease, I just take the 2 sides and fold it in half, matching up my bottom sides with the sides of the quilt top. And go ahead and iron. The iron creases will come out as you are sewing the rest of the quilt together, and especially once you quilt it, you won't even be able to tell. So once I've ironed it, I have a nice, neat crease right there in the middle. Then I go ahead and line up my pattern piece again, and you can trace around the template to get that curved edge, or you can just go ahead and cut. I've done it both ways, and both ways work just fine. I am tracing it here, partly just to show you, and go ahead and trim. I'm going to bring my piece over here. So now I have template A I'm done with. That made the curved edges on the actual quilt top. And then I have my template B piece. I'm going to go ahead and open it up, matching right sides together. And because the centers of each piece are clearly defined by the iron line, I'm going to go ahead and match those up together. So I just have one layer of the quilt top with one layer of my corners. And I'll pin there. Then I find on the quilt corners where I marked the edges, where that template stops. So I have one here and one here, pretty close to the red line. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. Instead of putting the very end of my rink corner here, I move it over and do the outside corner. So I have a little bit sticking out that I'm going to be cutting off and trimming at the end. This is because I don't have anything like a drunkard's path would. I'm not connecting to a straight edge that's perpendicular to this. I'm actually trimming it so that it will ease in to the existing lines. So I'm going to match it up there and pin it. And do the same on the other side. This is where it gets a little tricky some more. You just have to play with it and ease the curves into each other. The fabric will stretch a little bit, and that's okay, but be careful not to stretch too much. I usually pin this part a lot, simply because I don't like taking things out and redoing them. But always start by pinning in the center of a curve, and then the center of that curve again, and then easing the rest of it in. Now when we begin to sew, we are going to start sewing right along the edge, and we're going to catch the corner of our rink corner, the black piece, and kind of ease into that 1/4 inch seam allowance that we have, probably by the 2nd or 3rd pin. And then just do the 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and then by that 2nd or 3rd pin we're going to start easing back towards the very edge of the quilt top. So let's go ahead and sew. You will want to backstitch as well. I'm already at that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Be sure to stop and adjust your quilt whenever you need to. It's better to go slow and take your time and get it right the first time than have to take it out and do it all over again. I'm hitting that 2nd pin, and I'll start easing right back to the edge of the fabric again. you trim off your threads. I sew over my pins simply because it helps me keep everything from shifting. You can take your pins out as you sew. It's totally up to you. I just try to go slow so that I'm not running over my pins specifically and breaking my needle. Once I've sewn it, then I will go back over to the ironing board. Take it with me. And you can iron the back or the front first, either way, doesn't matter. But you're going to want to iron the lighter fabric towards the darker fabric. So actually, usually, we start on the back. And this seam actually makes it pretty easy because the way we want to iron the fabric is the way it should go, and the curve of the fabric naturally pushes it that way. So you want to stretch it just a little bit so that all of your seams are pulled tight, but not too tight so that you stretch the fabric. But inevitably, with some heat and some moving around, the fabric does stretch a little bit. So that's why we're going to square up the corners here at the end. Moving back over to my table. Now this is the easiest to do if you have a rotary cutter and a ruler and a rotary cutter mat. If you do not have it, you can take a ruler and just measure the corners and mark it, and then go ahead and cut it with your scissors. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use my rotary cutter and my mat. So I'm going to make sure that my edges of the quilt top line up with the lines on my grid. So I have a straight line up here, almost over here. Now we're straight. What you would do if you do not have a rotary cutter, you line up your ruler with the edge of the quilt top and then just mark where your extra fabric will be. And then you do the same on the other side, and then just go ahead and cut on those lines. But since I'm using a rotary cutter, I will line it up with my ruler and my mat and just cut off the extra. And then we're having all the little pieces down here. You can do the top as well. And then you're all set to go. And then you just add your borders like you normally would, and happy quilting. Thanks. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. My email is little.patches@yahoo.com. Thanks. Have a good day.